Okay, departments switching to 5-inch hose for several reasons. The biggest one is a tactical advantage. Normally in our current operations, when you lay 4-inch hose, you're ending up laying dual lines. Your maximum length is 500 feet. That ties up at least one pumper. Normally, we tie up 2 pumpers doing water supply, a lot of times 3. First pumper gets there, goes into attack. Second pumper lays dual 4-inch lines. He gets to 500 feet, he has to stop, he can't make it all the way, then you have to call another pumper. It doesn't matter how long it takes. Usually it's been from anywhere from 200 to 300 feet that they would complete the lay on average. And then you may have to send a pumper back to hook up the pump. Well, that's 3 crews that are tied up. Now, they will eventually filter to the fire scene, but when switching to the 5-inch hose, first pumper still goes in fast attack, and the second pumper in catches the hydrant, he lays straight in, he can lay up to 1,000 feet and still supply the water that we need for the fire scene. That puts all the other companies that used to be tied up doing water supply at the fire scene to do task level assignments. So you get more crews up to the scene faster to do fire attack, a second line is attack, a search and rescue group, an evacuation group, and then your RIT team. So once you start getting crews to the scene faster, then you start making those control points faster. You get your fire knocked down, you get your search out of the way, rather than waiting the 5 to 15 minutes that it's going to take to get somebody there. One of the other reasons is this is an off-the-shelf brand or an off-the-shelf product. Everybody in the surrounding area that uses 5-inch hose uses the exact same measurements, fittings, that way. So if you run mutual aid, like with Pearland, if y'all run with Pearland, if you run mutual aid through Clear Lake, up in north in Porter, the couplings all match up. So there's you don't have to carry a bunch of adapters to work with Pasadena, a bunch of adapters to work with Pearland. These snap right into their stuff. We're cutting out the number of adapters you're required to use to make hookups. So instead of laying dual lines, now you have one single line, and that's all the supply you need. Previously, your trigger, when you were laying 4-inch hose, your trigger is at 500 feet. Once you hit 500 feet, what did you have to do?
Be on the pumper.
Tell the incident commander, hey, I've laid 500 feet. I either need another pumper to lay me out, I need somebody to go back and hook up the pump. So that triggers him to give another order. With a 5-inch hose, your trigger is 700 feet. Once you hit 700 feet, you say, hey, incident commander, I've laid 700 feet of 5-inch. Now, you don't have to stop laying once you hit that 700 feet. That's the trigger for him to make the decision, hey, I need to send somebody back to hook up the pump. It becomes the incident commander's decision based on what the fire is doing right now. Is it static? You got 2 3/4 and a 2.5 on the ground. You've got water supply covered. The fire is being contained. Do you need to send somebody back to hook up the pump? Maybe not. Is the fire progressing? Is it getting worse? Is it taking more area? You have to put more crews in operation. Okay, now maybe I need to send somebody back to hook up the pump because we're going to need the additional pressure in the water supply. So it really becomes on the incident commander to say, hey, we are going to need more water. We're going to need somebody to hook up the pump. We have laid, when Engine 83 was doing the trials, we laid 500 feet on a house fire. We had 3 working 1 3/4 at 150 gallons per minute. We still had a good residual of about 40 pounds, and we had a 2.5 on the ground. So that shows you the difference in the amount of water that we were getting with a 4-inch. We couldn't do that with dual 4s at 500 feet. The friction loss is much lower. You increase the diameter of the hose by only 1 inch, but you've quadrupled the water supply or lowered the friction loss. So you're able to use more that the hydrant has to offer. Now obviously, the better your hydrant is, the more water you're going to get. The worse your hydrant is, you're still going to get a decent amount of water from it. So it's still based on what you're going to get from the fire hydrant. The dual hose bed loads will cease. You'll get 1 single bed of 5-inch. Now with some of the apparatus, the center board is required for the hose dividers. That will stay in there. You may look like you have dual hose beds, but it will be a single bed. You'll start loading on the right side. Once you hit 500 feet, you'll automatically roll over to the left side bed and start loading the other 500 feet. You won't need a coupling hanging out in the back. We will not be doing dual 5-inch lines anywhere. It would have to be a huge fire to have supply somebody with dual 5-inch lines. Normally, we're doing a standard operation. First in pumper goes in fast attack, second pumper in lays of supply. You do a forward supply line lay. We're not going to be using the hydrant valve as a standard operation to attach to the 2.5. The reason is we want all the water to go down the 5-inch, and we don't want anybody else accidentally tagging that 2.5 and laying off in a different direction. That's already happened and it's caused problems. Also, we've had people lay from the 2.5 with a 5-inch line. That's also occurred. So to save all that trouble, we're only going to stick with one 5-inch on the large diameter outlet. You'll lay in your forward, or you can lay a reverse line. We're not taking the hydrant valve away from you. If you're sent back to hook up and pump, then the hydrant valve is still useful. The hydrant valve is rather expensive, it's big and bulky and it's heavy. We're changing, as those hydrant valves break, we're not going to repair them. We're replacing them with a 2.5 to 2.5-inch gate valve. It's smaller, less expensive, but it still does the same job. It also takes up less space in your compartments. We're not going to stop hookup and pump operations. We're not going to stop relay operations, but you will find them greatly diminished. Where you would normally have 2 or 3 pumpers in water supply, you're going to find you can do it with one pumper laying a 5-inch. You're still going to need to learn how to send somebody back to hook up and pump, but you'll notice those drop off drastically. The 5-inch takes a different loading method than we are used to with the 4-inch. It requires more dutchmans, and that's part of the class is to teach you how to load this hose. When we talk about loading hose and you have a hose bed, your cab is up here, we want all the couplings forced into the back 1/3 of the hose bed. So anywhere above the wheel on the back side, you're forcing the couplings here. That's going to require you to put more dutchmans in the hose load than normally. It does a couple of things for us. One, it puts a lot of the weight forward of the wheel. Puts the center of gravity more to the center. 2, it doesn't leave any big, huge humps at the tail end of the hose bed, and that was a problem. When you cover it with a hose bed or you have a hose bar down there, those couplings, if they're high up on the back end, can get caught between those two, especially the first couple of hose lines coming out of the bed. So to fix that, we move all the hose couplings back here. We get a much flatter hose load. You're going to have to work with it and say, okay, here I'm going to have to put a dutchman, here I'm going to have to put a dutchman. But you'll stagger the couplings in this back 1/3 area. You'll end up with a nice flat hose bed. It'll lay off rather easily. We're going to give you a 50-foot section of 5-inch hose. This is going to take the place of the 50-foot section of 4-inch hose that you currently have. So when you're sent back to hook up and pump, and you need that second line from the fire hydrant, it can go around the front end of your pumper, around the back end of your pumper, and then you can take 2 supply lines in. We're going to give you a 25-foot section of hose and a 15-foot section of hose. When we originally set up the program, we were going to give you the 25-footer as to take the place of the 6-inch soft suction. We thought, okay, we had so much training issues and problems deploying the 6-inch soft suction correctly that it became problematic to use because we just couldn't train it in fast enough. We gave him the 25-footer. Okay, now you can be a little more flexible with where you spotted your pumper, but the 25 proved to be too long for that. So we got a 15-foot section of 5-inch hose, and that's going to actually take the place of your 6-inch soft suction. It's a little more flexible on where you spot. You can still get a good amount of water. 6-inch will always give you more water, but you have to spot it correctly. You can be a little more forgiving with the 15-foot 5-inch. We're not going to take the 25-foot away from you. But the 50, the 25, and the 15 are identical construction to the 100-foots. So you can use them in any hose lay that you have. The 100-foot sections of hose have a 4-inch black band at the 50-foot mark. So when you're laying 5-inch down the road, you get to that 50-foot mark, you should see that black band. That's going to tell you, hey, I've got another 50 feet up in the hose bed, or if you see the stripe back there, you know, okay, I've got less than 50 feet, maybe 25 foot left in the hose bed. It's going to make a decision on, do I drag the rest of that 100 foot out and make my connection, or do I pick one of my short sections to complete? If you lay out and you've got a coupling near your tailboard, rather than dragging a full 100-foot section out, break the section, get your 25, your 15, or your 50, and make that to complete your connection. Okay. But if you lay 700 feet and you just need 50 foot to complete the lay, use your 50-foot section. Okay. They're all identical in construction and pressure requirements. Attached in the hose bed is this adapter here. This is your hydrant connection. We picked this because it was 4-inch Houston thread to the hydrant and long handles. We wanted to cut down on the amount of tools that you had to take at the fire hydrant. So now all you're going to have is this coupling and then your hydrant wrench. The hydrant wrench is a Storz type hydrant spanner, but this doesn't require any tools to tighten up to the hydrant. Now you only get one of these. If you're sent in as the primary supply pumper, you'll drop off, you'll hook this to the fire hydrant, you'll lay your 5-inch off. If you're ordered to do a reverse lay where you stop at the fire truck, currently we want you to leave this on there. We've had problems where the guys took this off and they put it on the tailboard and they laid their 5-inch away because they were laying from a 4-inch pumper that had no way to connect. So the guys had to run 800 feet down to the 5-inch pumper to get an adapter. So leave this on. That way, if you're still interfacing with a 4-inch style pumper, they can connect right in. If you need to make a hydrant connection, you're going to be issued 2 of these adapters. These are 5-inch Storz to 4-inch Houston thread females. You'll have 2 of these on the pumper. So if you're reverse laying and you leave your hydrant adapter on the hose, you'll have 2 of these to make the connection. You'll be issued 2 5-inch to 4-inch males. So if you're still interfacing with 4-inch pumpers, they lay you dual 4-inch lines to your intakes. You'll have 2 of these to make a connection, or you'll have 2 of these to make a connection. If they forward lay a line, you're going to need these 2 on your Storz intakes. If they reverse lay, you're going to need 2 of these. That's what we're issuing you, and that's what we're going to take from you. You're going to be issued all the 5-inch Storz adapters that you need, and then we're going to take up any excess adapters that you have. Now, the amount of adapters you're given was designed to cover any situation that you have when you're interfacing with a 4-inch or a pumper that's still 4-inch. So you've got enough adapters to adapt to any situation, even if you're sent back to hook up and pump when somebody's laid dual 4-inch lines. So we've gone through all that. Now, in the initial out phase of outfitting all the 5-inch pumpers, you're going to get the minimum amount of adapters that it takes to do every job that you need to be done. After we get everybody outfitted and you want a couple of extra adapters, you're more than willing to request, or you're able to request them and get them. So you want to carry an extra adapter on either side of the apparatus. But on the initial outfit, you're going to get the minimum numbers, and that's it. If you go requesting one, you're going to get denied. Okay? My phone will ring, and I'll say no. So, okay. Your 4-inch discharge, you're not going to automatically convert that to a 5-inch outlet. The new pumpers that are coming in, they will have a 5-inch Storz large diameter discharge. For the reserves and the apparatus that we convert to 5-inch, they're still going to have their 4-inch large diameter discharge. You can use this piece to convert it to pump a 5-inch because you may still be pumping a 4-inch. As we get everybody deployed, then we may give you one to leave permanently. One of the problems we found out is the guys that wanted to keep this on as a discharge, it stuck out too far away from the pump panel and they had a chance to hang it on something, especially if they were going through a tight apartment gate. Also, they wanted to put this adapter on and then a 5-inch stretch to 2.5 so they can have a 2.5-inch outlet. Leaving these two rigid fittings connected together too long made the rubber bond together and made them hard to get apart. So we want you to have this so you can pump a 5-inch, but we don't want you leaving it on the discharge, the 4-inch large diameter discharge, unless you need it. So leave it on. One of the problems that we identified with these apparatus is your 5-inch hose has a full-time swivel coupling. Which means over the years and all the advancements we've made in 5-inch hose, this rubber gasket on a full-time swivel is going to stay solid, but this outer ring rotates, and that's what you're going to lock together. These are, however, what are called rigid fittings. If you put a rigid fitting to a rigid fitting, then these two rubber gaskets, as you make them together, and that rubber mounts together and you got to rub those rubber gaskets together. Sometimes they don't want to spin. So we identified that as a problem. Kochek, the company we buy our hose from, developed this lubricating spray. All you have to do is spray one of the rubber gaskets and makes those couplings slide together easier. We'll also give you a can of silicone spray. This works similar to the Kochek product. Both of these have material handling numbers at logistics. They don't go in your personal locker. They go in the EO side compartment. That's where they stay. That's where you use them. If you run out, request more. They have plenty. Also, this spray silicone is the same stuff you use for the roll-up compartment doors and the slide deck guns. So the same product, you're going to be using this on apparatus day when you clean your apparatus. You do it when you have to put those two together. So if I could get 2 volunteers up here. All I want you to do is make them together and show how difficult it can be when you put the two fittings together. And just hold still over here. You don't have to worry about the latches when you're assembling. Okay. You feel how little tight that was to get together. Now, to get it apart, you have to release both latches once you turn.
You go ahead.
There you go. All right. You only have to spray one of them.
Not easier.
All right. Thank you. Go get brownie points. As far as having to spray the couplings, you only have to do it when you make the connection. You don't have to do it on a daily basis or a routine basis. These are water saw or water-based stuff, so they work with the water. When water evaporates, the lubricant's still there. When you make a connection, you only have to spray one side gasket. Now, normally, when you're assembling everything, you can muscle through a tight connection as you're going through. The adrenaline's pumping, you're making the corrections, you can push it through and make the snap connection just like y'all did. But if there's a problem, if it gets a little tight, then spray one of them and it should slide right together. Some of the couplings will slide together, no problem. Other couplings I've had is just, they stuck and they just didn't want to go unless you spray the lubricant. So it's really a situation dependent. It depends on the coupling that you have. You won't find that problem with this. So when you connect this to your big 6-inch intake Storks connection, this will rotate. Those gaskets won't have to rub together. Ladder truck operations, we're not changing at all. We still want you to be 100 foot away from the base of the ladder truck. So when you're set to pump into a ladder truck or ladder pipe operation, we're not changing that from 4-inch. You'll give them one 5-inch hose. You'll connect into the base of the ladder truck. I'll have to go and look at your ladder truck. We are going to convert them to where they have a 5-inch storage intake. 96s, did we do? Yeah, we did your ladder truck already. I'll have to look at 46's ladder and we'll design what we have. What we found is the ladder trucks come with either a 6-inch intake or a 5-inch intake or a 4-inch intake. And of the 4-inch intakes, some of them are Houston thread and some of them are national thread. And some are tall and some are short and some are close in and some are far out. So it takes an individual approach to each ladder truck to get the best solution for that. So we'll look at yours and we'll adapt it. 96s has been done. But you still need to get 200 PSI to the base of the ladder truck. The normal pump pressure for the 4-inch was 220. That accounted, you needed 200 PSI at the base for the ladder truck and 20 pounds of friction loss. But with the 5-inch, you're only going to be pumping around 205, 208. Now the service test pressure on this model 5-inch hose is 225, so you fall within that range. You can still get up to, ladder pucks normally do 1250, 15, or the towers can do up to 2000. You can do all those with a single 5-inch line. Now with the towers, obviously you're going to be getting close to the rated pressure of the 5-inch, but it's still unacceptable. When we pressure test these during hose testings, they have stayed above 225. But service test pressure is 225 for all this 5-inch hose. So ladder truck operation is not changing. The biggest operational change we're having is in fire department connections.
Chief, when you're talking about retrofitting ladder 46, we're like changing what we already got storage connection on there.
Then you don't need anything.
Yeah, they got a storage in the back. We got a brand new spark.
Okay, the only other thing you need is you need a Storts fitting to 4-inch adapter in case somebody lays 4-inch too. That's the only thing.
What we've done is we got the storage connection. We just take it off.
You're good.
It's right there.
You're golden. Okay, don't have to do anything to you. What we have been doing is we've been making sure that they had a 5-inch Storts, and then we've given them an adapter to make sure they can connect. But if you're already there, then I don't need to do anything to you. Okay, the biggest change I said again was the fire department connection. Your fire department connections are what size hose?
2.5 inch.
2.5 inch what?
2.5 inch female coupler.
Okay. Now on our 4-inch, you take your 2.5 to 4-inch adapter, you'd hook that into the connection and you could lay a 4-inch all the way away from the building. The reason we were doing that operation is because we wanted you to supply the sprinkler and the standpipe system, and we wanted your pumper far enough away that you would be in a protected area. Several of the high rises in the United States that we've had where they've had glass come out of the building, debris fall off of the building, came down on the fire hoses and the fire trucks and the firemen, and that created a danger zone. So our solution was you hook the 4-inch into the 2.5-inch connected with your adapters, you lay away to a protected area, or you lay to your fire hydrant, and then you can pump back. The 4-inch had a 300 PSI service test range, so you could do most operations that way, up to usually about a 30 to 40 foot building. But the 5-inch hose doesn't have that service test pressure, so we have to stay within the 225 PSI range. So any building that's 3 stories, equal to or less 3 stories, you can still do with the 5-inch. You can take the adapter, you can take your 5-inch to 2.5-inch adapter, connect it to the hose, connect that into the fire department connection, and drive away and pump back in. You're talking about warehouses, small office buildings, and small strip centers. Okay? Anything that's below 3 stories, it falls within the pressure range of the 5-inch hose. The problems we come across is if the fire department connection is waist high or higher, it develops a lot of weight on that fire department connection, and you'll see a noticeable deflection in this coupling when you do it. So there's two ways to fix that. One is to get you a spare elbow. You can request these from logistics. You can put your 5-inch adapter into that. That way that goes into the fire department connection. Your 5-inch hose comes up to here. That's enough of a strain relief that you don't have the bend on that 5-inch, that 2.5-inch connection. You can put enough weight on this that you can break this, or there's a possibility you can do it. The other way is take a 50-foot section of 3-inch hose down to your fire department, or your 3-inch, your 2.5 to 5-inch adapter here, and then you can lay off to your fire hydrant and pump that. Okay, a short section of 3-inch, 50 foot will allow you to pump all the way through. Now, for anything that's greater than 3 stories, anything greater than 3 stories, you drop your apartment lay into the fire department connection, and you lay out a maximum of 300 feet. Now we do that because that's how much hose you have loaded. So from your fire department connection, you'll lay out 300 feet. That puts your pumper in a fairly protected area, and then you can go from your pumper to the hydrant. Mostly we have to be within 300 to 500 feet from the fire department connection to a fire hydrant. But due to like esplanades, turnarounds, and driveways, it may be 300 feet with a tape measure, but if you're going to drive it laying hose, it becomes longer. Most of what we've tied in District 83 is we can lay out the full 300 feet of apartment lay, hook it into a discharge, and then the hydrant is usually within a distance that you can drag the 5-inch over to the hydrant and hook it up. If it's beyond that, have your next in pumper lay from a hydrant into you, and then you can pump in. The 3-inch hose has a service test pressure of 400 psi. That allows you to get all the pressure up to your 30, 40 story buildings. Now beyond that, you need the high pressure hose and either pumper engine 2 or engine 8 as your high pressure pumpers. So most every operation that we have will either be done with a less than 3 story. You can drop your 50 foot or your 5-inch and use either the elbow or a 50-foot piece of 3-inch. Anything over 3 stories, drop your apartment lay. If you find yourself in a protected area at less than 300 feet, fine. The shorter distance you can get, the better. But your maximum is 300 feet. You got 2 inlets for your 2.5. You can lay a 2.5 and 3-inch. You just have to adjust your pump pressures for that. You can lay your single apartment lay 3-inch. Your second pumper comes in, they can lay you a second 3-inch to you. And that way you have 3-inch lines going in the fire department connection. Nominal flow for a 3-inch is 750 gallons per minute. Most of our high-rise fires have fallen into that 250, 500, and 750 GPM range, mostly within the 500s. There's very few high-rise fires that go into 1,000 gallons or better. So the 3-inch operation will work. Normally you pull 1 2.5 up there, and that's 250 gallons per minute. You set up a bunch of sprinklers going off and a 2.5-inch hose line, you're at 500. We've only had, I believe, one that we ended up with 2 2.5s and sprinkler systems going off, and that puts us right at 750. Well within the range of a single 3-inch line. Okay, do you have any questions on that operation? Okay. When you're laying the 5-inch hose, we want you to try and lay it as far to the right side as possible. Now I know you're not going to be given a choice all the time, but if you're given the choice, lay as far to the right side as possible. That leaves you an alleyway for future apparatus to come in. The 5-inch hose is larger than the 4-inch. It's tougher to drive over. It's not as tough as the 4-inch hose, and we don't want you driving over it. However, we understand realities of putting pumpers into place, it's not always going to happen. We've had a couple of accidents already with apparatus driving over 5-inch hose. I've had ladder trucks drive over it and the fire hose survived without a problem. Ladder 59 drove over it, picked up a 5-inch coupling set between the duals and yanked it away from the fire hydrant and broke the guy's leg. Okay? So he was trying to straddle it, he just missed it. So if you can help it, don't drive over it. But that's not always going to happen. Try to avoid it if at all possible. Again, we're going to stop using that 4-inch gate valve as a standard operating procedure when you're forward laying or reverse laying from the fire hydrant. And we've talked about the reasons why. We're not taking that adapter from you. We're going to leave it with you, because if you go back to hook up and pump, you're going to need 1 to 2 of those valves to assist with operations. When you do your hook up and pump, you're going to lay, somebody's forward laid you a 5-inch. You come back to the hydrant to hook up and pump. You're going to have to request to shut the hydrant down. Once you shut the hydrant down, that's going to give you the chance to put 1 or 2 valves on the 2.5s. What's going to be connected to the fire hydrant is this. So this is going to go to one of your discharges. You'll unscrew this from the fire hydrant, it's going to go to one of your discharges. If it's not going to reach because it's either one too heavy or you just can't get it around to the 5-inch discharge, then you should have a 15, a 25, or a 50 that you can come from the discharge and then take this adapter off, connect your 2 pieces together, and then you can pump. Okay. But you're given a 2.5, you're given 2 of these so you can go off each side. But normally, you shut the hydrant down, you put the valves on the fire hydrant, you get your 15-foot section as your soft suction hooked into your pumper. You take the 5-inch that was connected to the hydrant, put that on your discharge, turn the fire hydrant back on, and send water down. Now you have time to come off those 2 valves and bring 2nd and a 3rd line into your apparatus. So it gets your water flowing again, but it still allows you to bring more water in. The more water you have coming into your pumper, the more that you can pump out. Hose clamps, we've identified a problem with the hose clamps. It's a personnel issue. The hose clamps that we currently have will work for the 5-inch hose. The 4-inch hose has a rough fabric coating. It was had a lot of friction to it. When you put the hose clamp on, you took it off. But the 5-inch hose is a slick rubber coating, and when you get water on it, it gets even slicker. But the 5-inch hose clamp will fit on, or the hose clamp will fit on this, and it will stop the water flow. The problems we identified was when the guys were starting to open the 5-inch hose clamp after water came to it, they were taking too long. They were opening up a couple of turns and looking up to see what was going on, or they were taking their sweet time about opening up. That put enough pressure on it from that side, and they opened enough, it took the drag off of it, and you would shoot that hose clamp down the hose. The other problem we identified, and this is what we first found it, is guys would do the old trick of turning it open a couple of turns, and then they'd kick that release latch on the hose clamp and get it to pop open. The manufacturer tells you don't do that. And we've told you don't do that. We just can't break people of trying that. Well, that's exactly what happened the first time we had the failure. The guy turned it open a couple of times, he kicked that hose clamp and it shot down the hose. It went underneath the pumper and turned upside down. So that we identified as a problem. So we went out, we recreated this problem time and again, and we found out where the failure points were. And then we found out what the solutions were. The solutions were simple. When you lay your 5-inch hose out, you have a coupling. You want your hose clamp 1 to 2 feet behind a coupling. Now that may mean you have to travel farther down to put the hose clamp on. But if the hose clamp does move, it only moves 1 to 2 feet and then it hits that coupling and stops. If you put it all the way back down ahead of a coupling and it slides all 100 feet of that hose, There is a possibility it could get enough kinetic energy to drive a coupling off. Now, we have not had that happen, but it has happened with other departments, and it is a possibility. So 1 to 2 feet behind a coupling from the water side, and you're fine. The other part is much simpler. You stand on the downstream side of the hose clamp, you commit to opening it up, you open it up quickly, and it works just fine. Okay? Don't kick it. Don't take your time opening it up. When it's time to open it, commit to opening it, stand on the downstream side, and you don't have no problem. Hose rotation does not change. You still rotate this hose every quarter. That's a manufacturer's requirement. That's with all fire hoses. The worst thing you can do with fire hose is not use it. Letting it sit in the apparatus destroys more fire hose than us running over it, damaging it, or using it. It's designed to be used. So when you come to your quarterly hose change, we want you to lay it out, run some water through it, drain it out, and load it back up and put the folds in a different pattern. If you damage sections of hose, you take it to logistics and you trade it out. That's all you have to do. One of the other reasons we're switching to 5-inch hose, other than it's an off-the-shelf variety, we have several manufacturers we buy from, it's field repairable. With the 4-inch hose, if we had a section of 4-inch hose that went bad, we'd take it off the apparatus, we'd give it to logistics, it'd sit there for 30 days or more, they'd finally get a big pallet of it, they'd send it to the guy to fix. 2 to 3 months later, we'd get it back, it'd go back on the shelf. With 5-inch hose, if you turn in a damaged section of 5-inch hose, one of the hose repair teams will come up there, they'll evaluate it, they can fix it that day and put it back in service. They can either shorten it to 50 foot, 25 or 15, or make 2 sections out of it depending upon the damage. Other couplings I've had with damage near the head, we just shortened it a foot, put it right back in as a 100-foot section. That field repairable has already saved us a bunch of money. The latches, one of the few problems we've had identified is this latch. There's a screw that goes in there, and that's the pivot point for this latch. Sometimes this vibrates out and it falls away. We've had cars park on it and it bent the screw. It got dropped out and it hit something just right and it bent this. Normally you'll always be able to push it down and get it to unlatch. But if this falls out, as long as you have one side that has a latch, it'll stay together. If you lose one, or if it falls out, try and save all the pieces if you can. If not, you take it to logistics, you get a replacement piece of hose, and you leave it for the repair team. Same with the adapters. If you have a problem with the adapter, you bring it in, you change it out, and somebody comes in and they repair it. If you're going to shoot 1,000 feet of 5-inch hose, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, if you damage anything, you take it to logistics and trade it out. After hours, you can drop down to 800 feet of 5-inch hose and still remain in service. Anything beyond 800 feet of 5-inch, then you have to call OEC and get somebody in on overtime to open up logistics and issue you back hose out. Okay. Any questions so far? Start on the right side of the hose bed, put your coupling all the way to the back end. You'll come across, you'll lay straight back, cross coming forward, straight back, cross coming forward, all the way across. The E1s will take 5 flats of 5-inch. Once you make your first coupling, this is going to go all the way back, and then we'll decide where this coupling needs to be to make a dutchman. The next flat of hose will be 4 to 6 inches short, both ends.
Go ahead.
Okay. On this one, you're going to stop your hose short of that coupling and then come forward to this side. That's going to make a short Dutchman to get the hose to lay flatter. Successive layers will lay over that, but it'll keep the hose from rising on top of that coupling so high that it impacts the hose bed covers. So Captain, you're going to go just short of that coupling.
And then what about the couplings being in the back third of the hose bed?
Yeah, we're gonna force them to the back third of the hose bed as we come up to it.
This is short.
This one's short. Your coupling ends up here, rather than taking it on back and forcing the coupling to have to flip like this, you're gonna put a Dutchman. So he's gonna take that part all the way back to the back. And get it all against the wall. And you can pull this one up just a bit. Cross over. You'll miss having that long one.
So this,
Okay. Yeah, you'll just miss having that long one because you had to force that coupling back to that back third. When you're loading the hose, you can roll it up. That keeps the air out of it. And then as you load it up, you can unroll it. That makes the hose load flatter. It keeps the air out of the hose bed. Higby. Okay, this would be the new Higby. So when those two line up, you know you're latched. When you hear that click, you know you're latched. Now this should still rotate.
Go.
When you hook the spanner wrench on there, this part of the spanner wrench releases the latch. The problem with the big part of the spanner wrench is you can either see where it hooks on, or you can see where it releases the latch, but you can't see both, and that's a design problem that we're working with the manufacturer. Normally, you only need the spanner wrenches when you're breaking down. Assembly, you can normally always put everything together by hand.